Before I start, distinguished chairman, let me just assuage your fears and assure you that all the decisions taken at the PTF are sound decisions based on science, data, and the experience of other countries. We have behind us a large technical team that assists us in looking at the latest literature, the latest guidance from international organizations, as well as our own local experience. And it's on the basis of that that we produce guidelines and we make decisions. But all those decisions are made in the best interest of the country and taking into cognizance the convenience of passengers, because we are all passengers at one point or the other, either ourselves or our friends or our families. Distinguished senators, there have been a number of changes in policies right from the time we closed the airports. When we first started, as the distinguished deputy chair mentioned earlier on, when we started with the evacuation flights and special flights, the arrangement then was that people coming into the country will need to have a negative COVID-19 PCR result, which has to be valid at the time in 7 days. And then when they come into the country, the main reason for testing when they come into the country was because we had given a long time frame from the time of testing to the time of arrival. And we also wanted to confirm and make sure that the results that they were presenting were true results. Distinguished senators, when we started this, an honorable minister will confirm, because he's been one who has been very concerned about what has been going on. In total, of the more than 14,000 Nigerians we brought in, 5% had negative COVID-19 PCR before boarding and had a positive result on arrival. There were situations from specific countries where we had up to 40% of the passengers in a single flight coming in with a negative COVID-19 PCR result and subsequently being tested and found to be positive. Now that conversion from a negative to a positivity rate cannot be explained by an incubation period. It can't. It's either they were using a serological test, antigen antibody, rapid diagnostic test, which has a sensitivity in the best of times in the field of 60%. In other words, it will only pick 6 out of 10 confirmed PCR positives. It's either they were using that test or they were presenting results that were not genuine. Either of the two, distinguished senators. So we had to find a way to address this, because once we open the skies, we know our pandemic is receding. We know the number of cases we are having on a regular basis is going down. The last thing we want is to set ourselves back. And the number of passengers we get, distinguished senators, in a day coming into the country, just coming in, is about 5,000 a day. So if we have, out of 14,000, we have 5%. You can imagine if we are having 5,000 passengers coming into the country every day, we will end up with a pandemic situation that will never really go away and will continue to suffer. So we looked at a different alternative for opening up the skies. There was no doubt we needed to open up the skies. We had been closed for more than 5 months. The aviation industry was really suffering. People were at the risk of losing their jobs, and our economy could not really pick up without opening the skies. So we looked at the data and we looked at the science. And distinguished senators, my apologies if I'm teaching you basic science, but when we talk about incubation period is the time from which you catch an infection to the time you present with symptoms. It's when you present with symptoms that you have the highest chance of having a positive result, and that's also the time when you are most infectious. If you have 100 persons leaving their residences, their hotels in London, and heading to Heathrow Airport, all 100 of them have had a test for COVID in their hands, and it's negative, and it's a genuine test. And on their way to the airport, all 100 caught COVID. By the time they land in Abuja, if you test that 100, you're likely to pick up only 7 that are positive. Only 7. If you ask them to go home and isolate, and day 5, you go and test them, you will pick up 85% of them, 85 out of 100. If you ask them to isolate for 7 days, and you go and test them on day 7, you'll pick up 94% of them. If you ask them to isolate for 2 weeks, and you go and test them at day 14, you'll pick up 99 out of 100. Because the normal incubation period is a bell-shaped curve. It's between 2 to 14 days, with the median of being between 5 to 7 days. If I catch COVID today, I'm likely to exhibit symptoms in the next 5 to 7 days on average. But those symptoms would be delayed until 14 days. So we said in PTF, the technical committee that I head, said the best time to test if somebody is coming in with a negative COVID-19 PCR result will be at day 7, because we want to be able to get people to exit isolation earlier. Distinguished senators, all of us travel. When we come back and we are told to isolate for 14 days, it's a challenge, and we all know this. And we are all literate. We all know the repercussions of having COVID and transmitting it to our families, etc. But nevertheless, it's a huge challenge. So we looked in a pragmatic manner at what is the best time to test. Day 7. If you test at day 7, you pick up 94% of those cases. The remaining 5% will say, well, we've done what we can. At day 7, we test. If you are negative by day 8, you exit isolation. The alternative would have been to leave it until day 14 and test. But we know the majority of people will go out by day 5 to 7. They would have had enough. Very few would be able to isolate for 14 days. So we're being pragmatic. Of course, countries like the UK, and they have a similar technical team, the same technical teams that are advising us are the technical teams that are advising them. They took the decision that they don't want that 5% risk to the elderly population, just because you and I do not want to stay at home for 14 days. So their decision was different based on the context of their country. But we know in Nigeria that it is very difficult to self-isolate for 14 days. After all, some of us need to go out on a daily basis to have our meals. Distinguished senators, if you have a negative COVID-19 PCR result before boarding, there is no point testing at the airport. You are putting undue burden on the passenger, you are exploiting the passenger, you are making it inconvenient for the passenger, and you are not going to make a substantial difference to the epidemic. The reason why it's better to test before boarding is because if you test before boarding and you are negative, a large chunk of those that would have gotten on board that had COVID would have been excluded. Secondly, when you board the plane and you sit down to have your lovely meal in first class or business class, distinguished senators, or economy, all of you would do what? You would pull your mask down. You and I know we will be more comfortable knowing that we are traveling in a cabin with people that have been confirmed not to be infectious. That's why. The alternative would have been to test at the airport. Now, the advantage of testing at the airport is all those that may have had fake results or have had a random test done, which we cannot rely on, at least will be able to confirm whether or not their results are true results or not. But to me, there is no point in testing before boarding, testing on arrival, and testing at day 7. We will be a laughing stock in the world because it is not based on sound science. So we said, okay, let us not throw away the baby with the bathwater. Let us at least look at the option of testing at the airport in case this current guideline does not work very well. Because we know we have been receiving passengers. Just a few days ago, there were passengers that came in with a serological test, a PCR test. Yeah, not a PCR test, but a serological test. We also had a look at our data for all those that had come in over the last 5 months, more than 14,000 Nigerians. And we identified 13 countries. Of those 13 countries, 9 countries, we had issues with them because they had high rates of change in their positivity rate, some as high as 14%. We had a meeting with the ambassadors of the 13 countries. We divided them into 2 groups. The first group of 9, we said to them, we are not happy with you. What is going on in your country? You are sending us people that are positive, even though they are showing documentation that they are negative on a piece of paper. But that result is not worth the paper it was printed on. So we sat with them, we looked at the various issues. We asked them for 2 things, both of which they have complied with. The first one was we wanted written assurance from their governments that whatever is presented at the airport is genuine. The second thing we asked them was a list of accredited laboratories in their countries that we would rely on for testing. And when they did that, we said, okay, that is fine. One of the main countries that we had problems with, that I will not mention, there's actually a process going on to arrange what we call an air bubble arrangement between Nigeria and that country. With an air bubble arrangement, it means all the Nigerians going to that country is the responsibility of our government to make sure whatever is presented before they go to that country is genuine, it follows the rules of that country, and vice versa when we are having people coming from that country. So to us in PTF, we had mitigated that risk of having people presenting with fake results or having results that are not consistent with the PCR. And we also had a system where if they come in with the wrong results, we quarantine them and we test them straight away. And if they are negative, they then go down the normal route of go home, stay for day 7, and we will repeat the test. Having said that, we have still continued with the process of looking at concession arrangements just in case this doesn't work. Because we know that for a lot of countries, it's challenging dealing with COVID. Today, it's one thing, tomorrow, it's another. So we have proceeded with an expression of interest that was waived by the RC Infrastructure Commission, Regulatory Commission. 12 companies applied, 5 have been shortlisted, and those shortlisted companies will proceed on to what we call an RFQ with a team drawn across Federal Ministry of Health, the aviation side, PTF, Infrastructure Regulatory Commission, the judicial, legal departments of those ministries. But, distinguished senators, as far as I'm concerned, if you test pre-boarding, and I'll re-emphasize this, if you test pre-boarding and you have confidence in that test, you do not need to test at the airport. You don't. But we've put in place that arrangement just in case things will not work out well in the next month or 2, so that at least we will have an option. Now, sticking with the testing, so our policy now is before you leave wherever you are, you test for COVID. Now, for how long do we arrange the validity for the PCR test? The closer you test to the time of boarding, the better. Because it reflects your true status on boarding the plane and also on arrival in Nigeria. So that was why we shortened the 7-day validity to, in fact, it's 96 hours, it's 4 days. But we said we prepared it to be 3 days, but it's 4 days. And we have checked with certain governments that we know that citizens have difficulty accessing PCR testing to find out how long does it take for the average passenger, and they've given us assurance that yes, 4 days will be okay, 3 days will be tight. And we know that there's a draft guideline by ICAO that's going to come out soon, and it's likely they have recommended 96 hours based on what I have seen, which was one of the reasons why we shifted to 96 hours. So you do a test, you board the plane, you arrive in Nigeria. But before you arrive in Nigeria, there are 3 things we would like you to do. The first one is you go on to a portal we have created with the support of COVID. It's called the Nigeria International Travel Portal. And distinguished senators, we have to be grateful to the private sector. I can assure you, if not for the private sector, if not for COVID, that portal would not have been up and our airport would not have been opened now. So that portal has been created. You go onto the portal. The first thing you register on your portal is the health questionnaire. It's the very same form that you are given in the plane or at the airport. It's now electronic. It's electronic because we realized one of the main reasons why we have congestion at the airport on arrival is because everybody is looking for space to fill in a form that you are not familiar with, asking you questions that you cannot remember, etc. So we're giving people the opportunity to fill the form in the comfort of their homes. They fill the form, they sign it. Then the next part is you'll be asked to upload your COVID-19 PCR result. Why do we need that electronically? You go to the airport, ask Hotel to open the room where they are keeping their documents. It's a room full of documents. If I ask Hotel to give me all the results for COVID-19 PCR for people in the last 1 month, they would probably spend days looking for it. So having it electronically would allow us to go back and check if at day 7 you are positive, just to check and see, does it look like a genuine lab? Does it look like a PCR test, etc.? So we have it electronically. And then the third thing, which is what has been generating a lot of issues, is the issue of payment. So on the portal at the moment, we have Lagos and Abuja. Lagos started the payment portal a long time ago. They've gone through the MOU process, they've gone to the Attorney General, the governor has signed, they have an MOU with the laboratories. And by the way, Senator, we have 14 laboratories on the portal. We do not have 4 laboratories. 11 of them are currently in Lagos, 3 of them are in Abuja. But we are working on expanding the Abuja portal. So there are 2 portals now, Lagos and Abuja, simply because that's where the international flights are now coming in. The Lagos portal, we had a lot of conversations with Lagos. Initially, they wanted to keep their portal, but we had to push for them to join the national portal, but as a link. So if you're going to Lagos, you click Lagos, it takes you to the Lagos portal completely. After you have filled your health questionnaire, and after you have uploaded your COVID-19 PCR result. If it's Abuja, it will come up with a list of laboratories. At the moment for Abuja, there are 3 laboratories. For Lagos, there are 11. But the requirements, which is what I said yesterday at the press briefing, the requirements for going onto the portal is very straightforward for laboratories, private labs. You have to be licensed with the Medical Laboratory Science Council of Nigeria. You have to have had NCDC validation and optimization to make sure your PCR results are genuine and of value. And then thirdly, you must get state accreditation. In other words, the state government or the FCT that you are working in must accredit you, recognize you as a PCR laboratory so that you feed your results into the state system. Because remember, COVID-19 PCR results, we don't just take them and put them aside. All of us are given reports every day in the evening. Where do we get that from? From testing in the labs. And it's not just public labs, it's private laboratories. Now, the second question we get frequently asked is, why are we not using public laboratories? Distinguished senators, we took the decision to use private laboratories because in any system where you start paying and you have a free system, the free system suffers because of it. The purpose of the public laboratories is to serve people, is to provide an excellent quality service that is free for the purpose of public health. It is not for serving personal needs. So, certainly at this point in time, we are separating the two. And just like in other countries like the UK, like Dubai, UAE, etc., where they charge for travel-related laboratory tests, in Nigeria we are also charging. If we were to use the public health system, distinguished senators, our average number of tests is about 2,500 a day. You are adding 5,000 a day. That's what, 7,500. Before you know it, all your consumables will be gone within a month, and then we'll have to start struggling to bring in consumables for testing in the public sphere. So it is fair, it is right, it is the right thing to do to get private laboratories to do this test, and they can do it within a very short time period. But of course, we have to maintain transparency and equity. And that's why for private laboratories going onto the portal, it's very simple. And I've said it to them numerous times. Nigerians are entrepreneurs. Get a lab, get it Medical Laboratory Science Council registered, make sure it has NCDC accreditation, make sure the state has recognized it. The negotiation for the price is done with the state authorities. It is not done by the PTF. But we have taken a very hard stand that it should not exceed a certain level, because we have a fairly good idea of what PCR tests are expensive anywhere you go in the world. We just had a colleague who came back from the UK, £250 he paid for a test. If you go to UAE, it's $100. If you go to India, it's no different. They are expensive, but we have to bring down the cost. And the best way to bring down the cost is to get as many laboratories as possible, high-quality laboratories to get onto the portal. Getting onto the portal is not a procurement thing. We don't mind having 100 laboratories on the Abuja portal. We really don't. But the process is streamlined. The labs access the state governments they are in, and they get accreditation, and then the state governments would write to the PTF and say, please put this laboratory onto the portal. Here are the details, here are the payment details, etc. and put them onto the portal. Simple. It's really that simple. At the moment, we started off with Abuja 2 labs. We had a third lab last week. We are very certain in the next 2-3 weeks we will have an additional 4-5 labs in Abuja. Yesterday, I have written and I also spoke to the commissioners of health and a few of the governors for Kano, Kaduna, Edo, Nasarawa, Anambra, Imo, Oshun, and Ogun. All these states have private laboratories that currently, and Kasana, that currently test for PCR and feed into the state system. So really, the only thing they need to do is to have an MOU with the state, and then they write to us and we put them onto the portal. Moving forward, the portal will no longer be based on airport locations. It will be based on states. So we will ask you, where would you be day 7 after arrival? Distinguished Senator, if you tell us you will be in Yobe, the Yobe link will come up, and there will be a long list of sample collection centers in Yobe, and you choose the one that you want to go to on day 7. Before we are able to expand to the rest of the country, the negotiation that has gone on with the laboratories is that for any laboratory that a passenger pays into, it is the responsibility of that laboratory to make sure whether you are in Maiduguri or Sokoto, after arriving at Abuja, they chase you and make sure your sample is collected and they test it. And they have signed up to that for now. But we will be expanding, because it's easier to expand sample collection centers than to expand laboratories. So for every laboratory, we will ask them, can you pick a geographic zone that you would like to put up sample collection centers? Because sample collection centers are very easy. Every state, every city has some sort of private lab that operates. So all they need to do is to make an arrangement with that lab, and all their passengers go to that lab for the sample to be collected, and then they move it and test it. But we know some of these labs already have presence outside Abuja. Some have presence in Kano, some have presence in other parts, Oshun, Ogun, etc. So it's a case of just making sure that the state government arrangement and the MOU is done. The other issue I think I've addressed the portal copy. So the challenges with the portal. As with anything that starts new, we had major challenges with the portal. One of the challenges we had was people with international cards. It was not working on the portal. We realized it's because they were choosing Naira, not US dollars. So we've advised them to be using US dollars on the portal, and it goes fairly smoothly. We're also inserting an option for PayPal. So you don't even need to use any of the Nigerian banks to do that. There was also the issue of the QR code, which some of you may have read in the newspaper. So the QR code is a barcode. Initially, when we designed the portal, if you finish everything and you pay, an email will come to you with a barcode and a link to the laboratory where you're going to have the test. You go into the link, you put in the day you want to have the test, the time, etc. You fill in what they call a CRF form, which electronically goes to SOMAS and reports the result. And it will also enable them to text you a day before your test as a reminder that you're going to have the test. But the emails were not coming back to certain individuals because those with Yahoo accounts, Yahoo was recognizing it as a spam, so it was completely blocking the emails from coming. And what we did was we changed the QR code so that the QR code, when you finish, instead of being emailed, straight away it will come up. And you can print out your QR code, and then you can come with it. There were still issues with people that were unable to pay. Those that were unable to pay, to me, it is unfair that if you have tried to pay on a system that you don't have control on, you go to the airport and you are denied boarding. Which is why we took the pragmatic decision of saying those that do not have a QR code, provided they have a COVID-19 negative result, should still be allowed to board. We had a whole plane in Dubai that was being denied, that was not going to fly with a whole load of Nigerians because they didn't have the QR code and they had to sort it out. And that was why that release went out. That even if you don't have a QR code, you should be able to board. But now we have an alternative. You'll still be able, if you go in and you put in your health questionnaire and you upload your COVID-19 result, there's the option of deferred payment if you cannot pay and just print out a temporary QR code. The temporary QR code will say quite clearly you can board with this, but if you come to Nigeria, you still have to pay. You still have to pay for the test. It will take you longer to clear the airport if you are going to pay at the airport. The banks have provided officers at the banks to aid with payment. If you are unable to pay at the airport, we will still allow you to proceed home, but we will take your details. And we expect you to be honorable enough to pay over the next 7 days and have your test. If you do not pay, we have approval to suspend your passport by day 14 so that you will not be able to travel for at least 6 months. And if you are a non-Nigerian, to recall your visa completely. This might sound very severe. But we have to have an enforcement level. Distinguished senators, if we were very confident every Nigerian will come in, pay, isolate, do whatever they are supposed to, we don't even need to ask you to pay before boarding. But we know that there's going to be a problem. We know, and it's not just for Nigerians. Anywhere else in the world, in the UK, they are struggling to keep people in self-isolation. Now, the question that distinguished senator said, why are we testing when other countries are just having their temperature monitored? So what my answer to that is, if we were certain that if you come in, you will go home, self-isolate for 7 days, it really doesn't matter whether you're positive or not on arrival. You're not going to transmit to anybody. But we know that will not happen. And that's why we just have to do the testing to make sure that those that are not infectious, that are infectious in the first instance, do not even board the plane and do not even come to our country. And those that subsequently convert and become positive and infectious, they are identified early on during the period of isolation and they are taken into care. And those that are not infectious and are okay by day 8 will say, Alhamdulillah, you can go, we will miss 5%, but 5% we can do. 5% we can do. there are still challenges with the portal, but the vast majority, when we started, 90% of passengers would go onto the portal, pay and everything. At the moment, so far, since starting, we've had 6,298 passengers registered as arriving in Lagos, and 3,111 passengers as arriving in Abuja, of which 3,946 has paid online in Lagos, and 1,595 have paid online in Abuja. So Nigerians are using the portal, and hand on heart, I believe that the PTF couldn't have done anything better with our partners to make sure that our airports open safely. Thank you.